So this line in the epistle reading caught me. Not only that, but we boast of our afflictions. And I thought, boast in our affliction? Really? And I get what Paul is trying to do. He's writing to the early church in Rome, and he's trying to give them guidance about how to live as Jesus followers under the power of a brutal empire. And he's right, of course. You know as well as I do, suffering can produce endurance. Endurance can produce character, and character can produce hope. And that's all because the transformative love of God, who we know as Creator and Christ and Holy Spirit, is poured into our hearts. Paul wants to show those Roman Christians how our faith can stand up to the slings and arrows, of outrageous fortune.
I think flings and sparrows might
that might be
be
better.
an interesting way to
Slings
say that.
and arrows of outrageous fortune. So I get that. And yes, affliction, suffering can produce endurance and character and hope. But I've lived long enough in this world, and I expect you all have as well, to know that doesn't always happen. And that sometimes suffering is just senseless and terrible, and it is awfully random sometimes. And even though I believe firmly that God can transform any affliction, boasting seems out of line.
And some suffering isn't random at all. It's intentional, and it's targeted by the strong against the weak. The Jesus followers of Rome experienced that, and we do too. ICE is on an uncontrolled rampage against our neighbors. Protesters are attacked by an unconstitutionally federalized National Guard in California. At the Pride March yesterday, we saw, held by marchers, hundreds of photographs and names of transgender folk murdered by people filled with hate. Do we boast in those kind of afflictions?
Just this week, a U.S. senator was thrown to the ground and handcuffed for asking an unscheduled question at a press conference. A Minnesota state representative and her husband were killed, and another state senator and his wife were seriously injured, shot by a conservative activist posing as a police officer. Do we boast in these afflictions?
Last Sunday, I was called to the emergency department at Leahy Hospital to pray with a patient, an immigrant day laborer with a wife and a 6-month-old child, brought in from detention by ICE, where he had been denied necessary surgery for weeks until he got so sick from a life-threatening infection that they finally relented and brought him to the emergency room. When I saw him, he had been wearing the same blood-soaked shirt for 2 weeks and sleeping on a concrete floor with a mylar film as a blanket. Do we boast about these afflictions? These are not Hamlet's slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. These are the direct result of an authoritarian order, or more accurately, the chaotic efforts to create an authoritarian regime that has apparently no concern for any human's well-being that's deemed troublesome or inconvenient. When Paul wrote of boasting in our affliction, what he was doing was creating alternative communities of love and grace all across the Eastern Mediterranean, across the Roman Empire. And remember, that Paul was expecting Jesus to come any moment now. Changing the system was a waste of time. It was unnecessary because Jesus was coming back today. What was needed, where the energy needed to go for him, was creating communities of resistance that offered a radical alternative to the power and violence of empire, making communities of grace.
And nearly 2,000 years later, we realize we're in this for the long haul. The struggle of love against violence is a long struggle, and the arc of the universe may bend toward justice, does bend toward justice. It's a slow bend. And so, with apologies to St. Paul, I suggest that boast is not the right verb for our afflictions. I suggest that resist is the correct verb for our afflictions. We resist in them.
And we Christians need to pay deep attention that our resistance is Christian, is disciplined, is faithful, is Christ-like, is loving. We refuse to feed violence by becoming violent ourselves. We refuse to meet hatred and fear with our own hatred and fear. To use Paul's phraseology, the kind of resistance that we want to offer is a resistance that creates endurance and character and hope. Because we know that God's transforming love has been poured into our hearts. We operate out of that place. We will love because God first loved us.
So I hint about how to do that. The historian Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who teaches at New York University, offers a clue when she writes, authoritarianism depends on breaking the horizontal bonds of solidarity and empathy. And UCC pastor Cameron Trimble speaks about what that means and how we restore those horizontal bonds. She says our resistance must be more than reactive. It must be relational. This moment asks us to show up differently. We can make visible a way of being that breaks the logic of fear and reasserts the possibility of belonging with one courageous and clear act at a time. And so we too believe that we are called to a resistance that is so based in relationship, so anchored in love that it shatters the cruel and brittle logic of authoritarianism. We believe we're called to a faithful resistance that produces endurance and character and hope because it's rooted in God's love.
Today is Trinity Sunday. It is a Sunday that we celebrate the impossible to understand and too wonderful to let go of truth that God is somehow one and also somehow three all at the same time. And usually you hear long sermons by me with lots of Greek and Latin.
But less heresy.
But less heresy. We speak of three persons, which is a terrible translation of the one God as Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit. There's a ton of theology wrapped up in that claim, described by Latin and Greek terms like perichoresis and circumincession and homoousion. And ultimately, all the fancy Greek and Latin terms are just tepid ways of saying that God, the three who is also one, is inherently and continuously in relationship. Those terms mean intertwining, dancing, mutual indwelling, sharing substance. They are all trying to describe a relationship too dynamic and intimate to be captured by merely human words or concepts or categories. A reality beyond all imagining and all, no matter how many PhDs in theology you have, all we can do is experience it with awe and respond to it in love.
And so this morning's reading from Proverbs highlights how God's wisdom partnered with God at the beginning of creation and helped to fashion every part of this world. And it ends with this wonderful phrase, thank you for highlighting it, Charles, rejoicing in God's inhabited world and delighting in the human race. Delighting in relationship, delighting in mutual indwelling, in connection, in endless dances of love. That is what the Trinity is all about.
So even in a week where we're not particularly rejoicing in God's inhabited world, or at least delighting in the human race, our faithful, God-centered resistance draws first on the love we have from God. And we pour that love into our horizontal relationships. We choose faithful resistance when we get to know each other deeply by listening to each other's pain and by delighting in each other's presence.
So we're going to do that this morning, like right now. We're going to build some horizontal relationships. And so what we want you to do is find another person in the congregation. It can be someone you know well, and it's kind of an adventure to do it with someone that you don't know well. And share with each other. First, share what hurts right now. What affliction? Briefly, right? We don't want to be here all day. And then share what glimmer of joy, of delight, of love is there in your life, or do you see in the world around you? Share these two things, a hurt and a delight, and then pray with each other. And those of you who are online, if you'll share hurts and delights in the chats, I'll join with you online, and we'll share and pray on that. What's the word I'm looking for? We'll do that online as well.
In the chat section?
Right. And so, if you need to stand up to move around the room, please do so, and find another person and share a hurt and a delight, and then pray.
Let's stand. And we'll move around.